On the India-Pakistan debate on the Newshour this evening, India's Information and Broadcasting Minister, senior Congress leader and Member of Parliament Manish Tiwari is taking on Zafar Hilaili, former Pakistan ambassador to the United States of America. Mr. Hilaili, would you now concede, the way things have gone, that this is all about the brinkmanship that Pakistan has been playing? The number of times Pakistan chose to ignore India's genuine concerns, whether it's Hafiz Saeed, 2611, Jamail Singh and Sarabjit, that this endless cycle of deliberately trying to underplay India's concerns is the reason why things have come to such a pass. Mr. Hilaili.
Absolutely not. But let me begin by expressing my condolences that somebody who was in prison and to whom we had the responsibility of safeguarding was killed in this heinous manner, and that let me also say that we are holding a judicial inquiries and the murderers have been identified and they will be tried. Having said that, I expect also to hear from the Indian Information Minister similar condolences over the beating up into a coma today of Sanaullah, a Pakistani prisoner in Kot Bhalwal jail on the outskirts of Indian Kashmir. He has been in jail for the last 17 years. He was beaten up senseless today. And this is after we got an assurance from the Indian minister responsible that India being a civilized country looks after prisoners, including Pakistani prisoners. So I would like to know what his reaction is to that. Having said that,
I would like to first, let's on that incident itself, since you made that point, let me say to you fair and square, Mr. Hilaili, there is no doubt that the attack that has happened in Jammu is despicable. But I'd like the minister to respond to you. But after this, I'd like to go back to the moot issues which I raised in my first question. Mr. Tiwari.
Well, Mr. Hilaili, to answer your question directly and squarely, what happened in Jammu is indeed reprehensible. And as a civilized society, we do not tolerate any such outrage taking place. And be rest assured that whosoever is responsible would be brought to justice. But having said that, let me broaden the issue a little bit. As we speak today, there is outrage across India over the manner in which Sarabjit Singh was done to death in the custody of the Pakistani establishment. But it is not about Sarabjit alone. Since 1971, we have been raising the issue of the 54 Indian prisoners of war who are apparently languishing in Pakistani jails. Recently, there was an expose which said that one of those prisoners has apparently been transferred to another country. Then there was this question of Jamail Singh and then Sarabjit Singh. So therefore, you see, if you look at the pattern of behavior, as Mr. Goswami was pointing out correctly, you know, whether it is 2611, whether it is Hafiz Saeed, whether it's our concerns over POWs which are allegedly languishing in your jails, none of our concerns has ever been addressed. You know, so it's all right for you to possibly score a debating point because of an unfortunate incident which has happened today. But let me be very fair and square, and I say this not as the Minister for Information and Broadcasting, but as an Indian citizen, that there is a widely held perception in India. I do not know whether it is right or wrong, but there's a widely held perception that the Pakistani establishment was unfortunately complicit in what happened to Sarabjit Singh.
Well, that's a strong statement coming from you, and that's that statement coming from the government. That may I ask you, Mr. Tiwari, do you also believe in that perception? And then I'll get Mr. Hilaili to respond. Do you believe in that perception?
Well, I don't think, Arnab, it would be fair for me because I do wear a hat as a Minister of the Union and I am a lawyer by profession and training to make a judgment one way or the other at this point in time. But I thought it was my responsibility and my duty as an Indian citizen to point it out to Mr. Hilaili, since he's a very distinguished Pakistani diplomat, about the perception which is widely held in India.
Well, that really is the issue. Mr. Hilali, if you would want me to, then I could elaborate for you the number of times on this channel, on this program, that I have debated with you on why your country ignores India's genuine concerns. Hafiz Saeed, the 26/11 trial, holding the Pakistani army accountable for the beheading of Indian soldiers, allowing Sarabjit's return, torture on Captain Saurabh Kalia, the torture and death of Chamel Singh. All of these incidents on numerous occasions, you have not, you as in personally to some extent, you Mr. Hilali, you've taken a very partisan position. Would you, Mr. Hilali, today, having seen what has happened, correct your own position on these matters and perhaps take a broader perspective as the minister is encouraging you to?
Well, first of all, let me point out that the minister very rightly said that as a person who's wearing a hat, he cannot draw conclusions without evidence. Whatever he may think is his view, but what he says as a minister has an impact and will be taken seriously here. Let me say only this, that I have heard so often that Sarabjit Singh was done to death as a deliberate act of the Pakistani establishment. Now please understand, he has been in prison for 23 years. In 1990, he was tried, convicted and sentenced to death. Why is it that for 23 years, if all we needed, if all the establishment, by the way, the Pakistan establishment, by which if you mean the army, was in power for a good 10-15 years of those of that time, why would it pick this particular moment? Now the answer is because it gives political dividends. Well, the establishment, quite frankly, this election is not taking a part in this election.
So that's not the issue.
So the only political dividends
that's not the issue. The issue is this. The issue is this, Mr. Hilali. Just 1 minute. The minister wants to come in as well. But I would like to point out to you, the issue is this, that in this case there were warnings. There were warnings by Lekhuram Meghwal, an inmate released in March from the same jail, who said that after Afzal Guru was hanged, Sarabjit was attacked. Right or wrong, Mr. Hilali? He also says that after Kasab was sent to the gallows, he was threatened. His sister writes a letter. You knew what happened to Chamel Singh, sir. Sir, there was a backdrop. Sir, you are consistently avoiding the question I'm raising today, which is of your continued indifference. The question is that of your continued indifference.
I am not. Well, you can keep on hurling accusations at me, but we won't make for a sensible debate. So if you hold your horses and listen, if this man was threatened, I'm not surprised he would be threatened. For example, I'm not surprised any Pakistani in an Indian jail would be threatened, because there are people around him who have a dislike for Pakistan. But the fact of the matter is that why this man was not protected is the subject of an inquiry. And let that inquiry be held, and let the people who have done this be punished. Now, if you think that this is all a plan, I was trying to point out to you that we do not wait nobody waits 23 years to kill a man just because
Mr. Hilali, you are for the fourth or fifth time you are dodging the question. No, you are dodging the question that I raised, which the minister also asked you. I want to go back to Manish Tiwari, and then I want to ask you, Mr. Hilali, why on Indian television tonight, a person otherwise so straight talking as you are dodging the issue that we are raising? Mr. Manish Tiwari wanted to intervene. Yes, Mr. Tiwari.
Mr. Hilali, that is exactly what perplexes us. Why now? And I think Mr. Goswami possibly elaborated on the backdrop, which forms the bedrock of apprehension in the minds of people in India, that here a judicial process, culminated or came to a logical conclusion. And unfortunately, there's a widely held perception, I'm not making a judgment one way or the other, that what happened to Chamal Singh and what happened to Sarabjit Singh was really a tit for tat. And that is why, this entire theory about the complicity of the Pakistani establishment, is something which is a widely held perception, as I'd earlier pointed out. And coming to the point that you raised about that you're not surprised that an Indian in a Pakistani jail was attacked, may I respectfully point out or point to the case of Mr. Chishti. There was an elderly gentleman who unfortunately, was implicated in a murder case. He spent time in an Indian jail, but he was not attacked in an Indian jail, and ultimately, the Indian establishment or the Indian government, allowed him to go back to Pakistan. So therefore, I don't think that those are fair parallels to draw.
And principally, Mr.
Well,
Hilali,
I suppose, Mr. Tiwari, we should be grateful for small mercies. You kept an innocent man for about 30 years in jail and then let him go without any charges. I mean, quite honestly, when you say attacked, what do you mean by attacked? I did not mean necessarily people come with bricks and iron bars to attack Indians in Pakistani jails. I just said they may become the subject of hostile remarks, of hostile actions, which is understandable. Now, what I would like to know is, now, as you want me to talk Turkey to you, what I would really want to know is, here is a man who, according to you, wandered across the border inebriated. Then what about the 14 people, the 14 Pakistanis who died as a result of his actions? Have you bothered about their relatives? Have you bothered about their feelings? Have you bothered about the fact that they are hollering for compensation? Have you offered any compensation? So, I mean, where do you want these matters to lead to? What about Sanaullah? What about his family? What about the people here?
Mr. Hilali, let us not forget.
Why are you always calling the petal black?
Mr. Hilali, you're getting a counter from the minister, but I'd like to... Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Halili, I can reverse the charge with interest. What about Hafiz Saeed? What about the outrage which took place in Mumbai? What about the 166 people who got killed? What about their relatives? What about the public perception in India? And, to top it all, you were not even ready to acknowledge as a country that Ajmal Kasab was a Pakistani citizen. What about all those people who were responsible for the conspiracy and still have not been brought to justice in Pakistan? So therefore, if you decide to hurl a charge at me, I can return it. I can reverse the charge and return it with interest, but that is not going to get us anywhere. Yeah. All that I'm trying to point out is what happened to Mr. Sarabjit Singh. What happened to Mr. Sarabjit Singh, despite the fact that there were prior warnings,
precisely,
is something which has outraged public sentiment in India. And I think, the Pakistani establishment can do better than shedding crocodile tears. And please start by addressing the question of those 54 prisoners of war who've been languishing in your jail since 1971, who've been writing letters back home. Every Indian prisoner who's been released from your jail has reported talking to them, citing them. I mean, why are you keeping innocent people in your jails? That is against the canons of the Geneva Convention. You are a diplomat. You know that one of the first rules of engagement which emerged, post the Treaty of Westphalia, and it took 300 years to do that, were the rules of engagement with regard to treatment of prisoners. And this is how you've been treating prisoners of war.
And the fact is, Mr. Hilali, let us not forget, Mr. Hilali.
I got my honors in history, but forget about that. What I want to ask you is, now there are 3 points you raised. You raised the point about Pakistan not acknowledging Kasab. Pakistan acknowledged Kasab as soon as Pakistan was given irrefutable evidence that this man was a Pakistani.
That is so completely erroneous.
Please,
I find it laughable.
Your government took
Qasam's family. Your government hit Qasam's family. It was reported on Geo News and not by your government. You hit Qasam. You hit the reality on Qasam. No, since you want to talk 2611, Mr. Since you want to talk 2611,
who in Pakistan has said he is sorry that
Mr.
Qasam was executed?
Since you want to talk 2611, you want to discuss 2611.
The matter is, we are sorry that Afzal Guru was assassinated in prison.
Mr. Halili, first of all, you orchestrate a conspiracy, then you perpetrate that conspiracy, then you kill 166 people, and then you want irrefutable evidence to acknowledge it. I mean, that really takes the cake.
No, we did
Mr.
not.
Halili,
We condemned Qasab.
I expected a little more sense of responsibility, a little higher level of maturity, and a little bit of introspection. A little bit of introspection at this juncture.
Yeah.
But what I seem to be getting is sanctimonious homilies, and you've completely ignored and obviated the question of 54 Indian prisoners of war. What about those 54 Indian?
All right, now let me tell you. If you let me talk,
why doesn't the Pakistani establishment, make an honest attempt to find those people in your jails and send them back?
I am coming to the Indian prisoners of war if they are in our jails. I myself, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have, after the 71 war, visited Pakistani jails to make a list of Indian prisoners of war. Time and time again, I, as Director, India Consular in the Foreign Office, visited Indian jails, have been present at the border when there has been an exchange of prisoners. If we do not want to keep and feed people... No, yeah, if you don't let me talk, then why are you complaining?
No, he's adding an interjection. So let him interject you. I'll give you equal time after that. Yes, Mr. Tiwari is interjecting, Mr. Hilali. Go ahead, Mr. Tiwari. After that, Mr. Hilali, I'll come back.
I just wanted to ask you a question. If what you are saying is correct, true and sacrosanct, and I have no reason to disbelieve you, then why is it that the last Indian prisoner who was released, possibly in 2011 or 2012, Mr. Surjit Singh, continues to say, and many before him, that our POWs continue to languish in your jails. So therefore, there is obviously a mismatch somewhere. Why don't you then allow us access to your jails?
Well, frankly, first of all, I think that would be a splendid idea, to allowing each other access to jails where they think they have people from Pakistan or India who are detained and who are not being acknowledged. I think that's a fantastic idea. Why not? Why don't you propose it? My point is this, that you insinuate all the time that somehow it is to our advantage. It is to our advantage. Well, if you shoot it down, please take it up at a higher level. It is not to our advantage to keep and feed Indians who have served their sentence.
But then, Mr. Hilali,
I just don't see what we have to do.
Then why don't you just send them back?
So send them back, Mr. Hilali.
Then why don't you just send them back?
Send them back. So
I don't know if they're there.
So, Mr. Hilali, you understand.
Sorry, I don't know if they're there.
Mr. Hilali, you understand. You understand where the issue is going. When we started this discussion about 15-20 minutes back, I asked you one question. And right now, I want you to consider that question and not look at what has happened in Jammu in isolation. I say to you, Mr. Hilali, you wanted credible evidence of Hafiz Saeed. We gave it, you didn't act. We told you speed up the 2611 trial, you don't act. Hina Rabbani Khan says India must be patient.
Mr. Goswami,
1 minute.
on 101 occasions,
Mr. Hilali, let me complete.
On
Mr. Hilali, let me complete. I didn't interrupt you. Mr. Hilali, I didn't interrupt you. Allow me to ask a question. My question to you is, Mr. Hilali, look at the generosity of the government of India, Mr. Hilali. There's Manish Tiwari on the program. Manish Tiwari is the Information and Broadcasting Minister of the country. He knows more than anybody else, though he will not acknowledge it on Times Now, that there are strong sentiments against why India should allow the cross-examination of 4 key witnesses of Mumbai 2611 as demanded by the Pakistanis. And this is despite the expert advice that we should not allow it. We have steadfastly not allowed it in the past. But even in this case, Mr. Hilali, we have allowed it now. In other words, to accommodate you, we are willing to be more than flexible But on none of the questions we ask you,
well,
Mr. Hilali, have you ever responded
Well, first of all,
with an open mind.
First of all,
You have a closed mind on all the issues we raised to you. Yes, Mr. Hilali.
Don't go around in describing me. Just listen to what I'm saying. I think it's a very good idea that you have allowed it.
Yes.
Our courts, as you know, are independent. Our courts, are sticklers for the implementation of the law.
Really?
Now, they are being given the opportunity, thanks to the fact that you finally agreed. Great. Let the people be questioned. Do you honestly believe? You see, one thing that flabbergasts me is if you really believe that the government of people of Pakistan would like crooks, thieves, terrorists and everybody else to plan attacks against another country from here with their permission, knowingly, and only so that they can they get Pakistan into more trouble.
No, I don't want to. No, I'm not debating with you, but I must.
May I come in for a moment?
No. One sec.
May I come in for a moment?
Mr. Tiwari, please. Yes, Mr. Tiwari.
Mr. Halili, the reality is, and both of us know it, when you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. At some point in time, certain people in your establishment decided that terror could be an instrument of state policy. Unfortunately, it has come back to bite you. Look at the kind of sectarian violence that you find all over Pakistan. It's a result of unfortunately flawed policies which you have pursued over a period of time. You thought it would pay dividend. You thought it would get you strategic depth in Afghanistan. You thought it would avenge you, the defeat of Bangladesh. But unfortunately, it's all come back to bite you. So therefore, I think, it's time that the strategic thinking in Pakistan evolved. We have shared challenges in terms of poverty, in terms of illiteracy, in terms of ensuring that indices of human development increase in South Asia. And the sooner your establishment comes to that realization that this is a flawed policy that you've pursued over the last 30 years, the better off that we would be.
Hear that, Mr. Hilali, and Mr. Hilali, 1 minute. That's coming from a government minister. 1 second. Since you think I'm an unrelenting hawk, let me tell you, Mr. Tiwari is a member of the UPA2 government, which is accused of being accommodating and conciliatory towards Pakistan. The question that is going to you, Mr. Hilali, is this. This government, of which Manish Tiwari is a responsible minister, is accused of being too conciliatory towards Pakistan for a long period of time, starting from the point of time in September 2006 when Manmohan Singh equated Pakistan with India as a victim of terrorism in Havana 2 months after the July train bombings in Mumbai, and there were people who were angry. Today, the same government is telling you this, that your government is to blame because you forced this game of brinkmanship. You are forcing this game of brinkmanship, Mr. Hilali. This brinkmanship will yield you nothing.
The fact of the matter is that when you in India come to the conclusion that much of the propaganda hurled against each other is a way of the pot calling the kettle black, till you grow up, till you take action against the Modis of this world.
Oh, Mr. Hilali, that is our internal politics.
What you are doing in Kashmir.
No, please.
You will.
Don't get into.
And Mr. Tiwari can sit and talk about all the good things that would happen if our two countries could reconcile their differences and get together. I agree absolutely. He will also agree. He's a sensible man. But the fact of the matter is that when incidents like this take place, you play it up, you deliberately do it to cause hate and
Mr.
sow
Hilali,
hate.
that's
and as a result of that, you make the problems of people who want friendship between the two countries much worse. Don't you realize the damage that your own actions, your own projections of events are causing this?
It's unfortunate you are saying that. Mr. Hilali, Mr. Tiwari is responding to you.
May I come in for a moment?
Yes, Mr. Tiwari.
May I just come in for a moment? Mr. Hilali, the reality is that India had dehyphenated itself from Pakistan. We are more than happy in pursuing an independent path which allows the indices of human development of our people to go up. So therefore, to say that Pakistan and India are really on the same page is completely erroneous. This short point that I was trying to make to you is that the sooner your establishment realizes that the policies of the last 3 decades are flawed, and what you see that happened with Sarabjit is actually a manifestation of the same policy, unfortunately you will not be able to come out of this very vicious cycle of sectarian violence which you've become a victim of. See what happened to that prosecutor of the 2611 case. Why was he shot dead? If I'm not mistaken, was he not the prosecutor in the Benazir Bhutto assassination case also? So therefore, before you start pointing fingers at us, please introspect as to what your policies have brought your own country to.
Mr. Tiwari, the trouble is that you are mistaking one phenomena for another. The phenomena of sectarianism, of Talibanism, of extremism in Pakistan has nothing to do with the ordinary folk or the government of Pakistan. We in Pakistan know very well where the extremists get their support, who is funding them, where and what is their agenda. Their agenda is basically, in my view, the takeover of Pakistan, which we are resisting and to which so far 50,000 innocent Pakistanis have died, and which we are bent on doing so, and that is why, despite all the problems,
you must be aware of what is going on around you.
No, Mr.
Hilali,
now, the point is this.
Mr. Hilali, but isn't that the legacy of the last 30 years? Isn't that the legacy of the last 30 years? Isn't that the legacy of the Afghan jihad? Isn't that the legacy of your entire philosophy that you wanted to bleed India with 1,000 cuts?
Exactly.
So therefore, what you're experiencing in Pakistan today, and it's unfortunate when innocent people die, whether in India or Pakistan, is actually the result of your flawed policies which you have pursued over all these years. It's the backlash of the Afghan jihad on one side, which has created the Pakistani Taliban. It is the backlash of your policies towards, promoting terror in India as an instrument of state policy, which has now come to bite you in Punjab and other provinces. So therefore, the cumulative baggage of 30 years is what is unfortunately now playing itself out in Pakistan. And the sooner, since you are in an election mode at this point in time, if this becomes a part of the mainstream Pakistani discourse, I think it would help not only India-Pakistan relations, but it would help, the entire cause of peace and prosperity in South Asia.
In fact, that is why, Mr. Hilali, that is why
you talk.
That is why.
Can you give me a leave? Let me get a word in between the two of you. I don't seem to get a word in. The fact of the matter is as follows, that if all that you say is true, let us assuming that every word you say is true, tell me why is it that is country which is 1/10 your size, 1/10 your population, 1/4 your army strength, 1/8 your air force naval strength, and 1/6 your air force strength, is thinking of attacking you? We are not mad. Now there must be something
Hilali, that is not even the question.
There is
no, that is not even the issue. No, 1 minute. Mr. Hilali, don't try and change the goalpost in the middle of the debate.
Well, you are by Pakistan. There is something that you are doing which threatens our existence. Why don't you sit down and introspect and get to grips with that problem?
Well,
Arnab, let me answer that. For that, Mr. Hilali, we'll have to rewind the clock back to 1947. The fact of the matter is, and you would not like it if I say it because we acknowledge the existence of Pakistan, but you need to introspect on the idea of Pakistan. You created a state in the name of religion. In 71, it split in the name of language. So therefore, if somebody needs to introspect as to what are the challenges which are really threatening, as you say, and we do not say that, the territorial integrity of Pakistan, it is not India. It is the strains and stresses of the whole idea of Pakistan itself.
Pakistan did not split because of language, and it certainly did not split because that lays to ground the theory of Muslims being a separate nation. It split because the government of Pakistan and the rulers of Pakistan over a period of years had acted in such a way that the Bengalis felt it was insufferable. And of course, when their reaction got to you,
today,
you of course stoked the embers and fanned the flames and intervened. But doesn't matter
Mr.
about
Halili,
that.
no,
We are responsible for
Mr.
what
Halili,
happened
the
in
fact is,
Pakistan.
Punjabi
We are
chauvinism-
responsible for that.
Manish
No, no,
Tiwari's
no, the
point.
reality is,
Make no
Mr.
words
Halili,
about it.
Mr.
But
Hilali,
it does not disprove
Mr.
any
Halili, the
theory.
reality is Pakistani Punjabi chauvinism was not prepared to acknowledge Bangla nationalism. So therefore, if I put it simply to say that a state created in the name of religion in 47, split in the name of language in 1971, it was just a way of saying it. We can go into a long explanation and an analysis of really what happened. The short point that I'm trying to make to you, Mr. Halili, is that possibly because you are in election mode at this point in time, you need to introspect about the stresses and strains on the idea of Pakistan and not be threatened, with regard to India. Insofar as India is concerned, we have never been a threat to any of our neighbors. We acknowledge the existence
my
of
last point. No,
Pakistan. We recognize the existence of Pakistan. But what we are not prepared to countenance, what we are not prepared to countenance and what we are not prepared to tolerate is the use of terror as an instrument of state policy and the killing of our innocent citizens in your jails. That is not what we are prepared to tolerate.
I have 1 minute on this debate. And therefore, Mr. Hilali, you say you are flabbergasted. Let me tell you, I am flabbergasted. I am flabbergasted that there is a man called Najam Sethi who has no experience in government, but despite that has been a journalist, who says something as ridiculous as saying there was not even a hint of a threat on Sarabjit. Then he doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know the place which he's supposed to govern. That's one point. Since you mentioned the word flabbergasted, all of India is flabbergasted that Najam Sethi has said something like that. Finally, Mr. Hilali, since we've come back to the root issue before I wrap up, the question I asked you right at the beginning, there is a background and history to what is happening. Even now, 42 years after 1971 and 5 years, 4.5 to 5 years after 26/11, will you support the game of brinkmanship that your country plays with India? Or do you think your country should now give up this brinkmanship forever?
First of all, I think this is utter arrant nonsense. I've never even heard of, even in our private discussions, anybody talk of brinkmanship. I don't know where you get these fantastic ideas out from
your actions.
Which hat you pull it out of.
From all your actions and your inactions.
Tell you this. You have permitted a Pakistani in jail to be killed by an Indian army soldier in jail. And 1 day after Sarabjit's murder, I'm sorry to say, that shows how quickly you react.
Mr. Hilali,
that shows how deep is the animosity
as of now,
that you harbor.
As of now,
it's a bad sign.
No, as of now,
Mr. Halili, let me set the record straight. Let me set the record. As of now, the gentleman in question
is injured.
Is not in the condition that you describe him to be. But be that as it may, as I said, it's extremely unfortunate. The perpetrators would be brought to justice, but that still does not deflect from the question that I began with, the question of perception in India that the Pakistani establishment was somehow complicit in what happened to Sarabjit.
Well, I'm glad we broadened the subject and we will debate it further. But surely this is time for introspection in Pakistan on the manner in which it has been responding to India all this while. But for that very interesting conversation, Mr. Hilali, seasoned diplomat, and India's Information and Broadcasting Minister Manish Tiwari, I thank you both gentlemen for joining me on this Newshour Debate. Thank you.